Should UI, UX, and product designers learn how to code? It's perhaps the most asked questions by people looking to become designers ever. And it's super confusing because so many different people have an opinion. But there is a right answer. And here is that right answer in a video less than 5 minutes long. So let's take a look first at a typical design process. We have one over here. So usually it's understanding the problem, designing a solution for that problem, and then building that solution. And then depending on the project, you can do a few rounds of these because the solution having to be iterated is another problem to be understood in and of itself. But that's for another video. There are a few different design roles that you can fulfill. UX research, for example, is mostly focused on that first step with some overlap and the handover to a UI or a UX designer here in step number 2. Then the UI designer is the same thing, but then focused on step number 2, and then with a slight overlap to building the solution. Imagine handover to a developer, and then development support perhaps. And you also have the UX or product designer, and someone in that role might do the whole thing until the developer handover. So looking at it like this, you would say that the UX researcher doesn't need to code. Like that's step 1. You don't have to code as a UX researcher. But the answer is slightly different for a UI designer, a product designer, or a UX designer. And one of the reasons being, or maybe the main reason, is I think nicely visualized into these two puzzle pieces. Like if you attach with your step of the process to the next step, so imagine this being step number 2, this being step number 3 from this overview, how nice would it be if you could attach like this? And what it means in practice is that the designer understands enough code to speak the language of a developer. That doesn't need to mean that a designer needs to code. They don't need to write code themselves, but understanding why a developer might respond in a certain way, or the impact your design can make on the availability of the developer, is going to be super helpful for sprint refinements and developer handover sessions and stuff like that. It's much better for sure than being a designer like this, where there's no fit at all. Your meetings will take longer, they will be more stressful for you and for the developer. It's not a win at all. So that's step 1. Understanding code in its very essence is a recommendation for UI, UX, and product designers. But at least the question, should you code yourself? And the answer is, you don't have to. You don't have to, because there usually are specialists to do the coding for you. So imagine a big team. Usually, if you have a corporation with 20 or 30 designers in a design chapter, there's usually a lot of generalists, so product UX designers, and then a few specialists. So I've worked in a team of 50 designers a few years back, and out of those 50, 40 were UX designers, 5 were researchers, and then you had a few leads, and then finally you also had a visual designer or 2. If you needed something very visual, you would go to that person. If you wanted to do a full UX research project, you would go to the UX researchers. But they also had a front-end specialist team, so no need to code at all. That's usually what happens in big teams. But you also have small teams. Imagine a new startup strapped for cash, so they need a few people to do everything. And in that case, knowing how to code can come in handy. As a designer, you're somewhat of a front-end focused professional, so being able to do some front-end coding in this case could help. Not a necessity again, you can always look for projects on a bigger team, but if you want to do the startup life, understanding how to code would help for sure. So it actually depends on what you're looking for. Both are okay. You should be able to code okay. You shouldn't be able to code also fine. It depends on what you want, and there are enough jobs available to find something you want. There's one reason extra to learn when you should be able to, or where you should learn to code, and that's if you want to become a freelancer. So imagine you working B2B, business to business, and you're trying to sell a website design to someone. In that case, what I've heard often is a question by people like, well, can you build it too? And when I say no, they would go to someone else. So after learning how to code in a very basic way, no code tools, low code tools, Webflow, Framer, WordPress, stuff like that, I converted many more leads into customers. So that's one reason to be able to code as a freelancer. So let's say you want to code. If that's something of an ambition for you, these are the 4 steps to take. Step 1, HTML, CSS for websites, super basic. It's a basic understanding that will really help you. It will help you with auto layout. In Figma, it will help you with Webflow and Framer as well. Then if you know HTML, CSS, Tailwind, CSS, or another framework of similar type would be step number 2. And that's because it's just so popular. Many developers who you might work with as a freelancer already use Tailwind, and they want you to be able to connect to their Tailwind code. And if you want to take it even 1 or 2 steps further, JavaScript, JS, or React, or Next.js would be the follow-up steps. If you learn those, you'll become a UX unicorn, and you'll be able to build web apps and dashboards and stuff like that. It's going to be very tough, especially steps 3 and 4 for a designer is like learning a completely new profession, and you don't have to. But if you want to go that path, you can, and you'll be in lots of demand if you go that way. So that's it. Just to briefly summarize, this is enough. Understanding a basic of code, HTML, CSS, will make your collaboration with developers so much easier. And then depending on the team you're in or the ambitions that you have for certain types of companies, you can choose to learn or not to learn code. And that's it. Should designers learn how to code? Well, perhaps depends on you.